It's the Security Weekly News. I'm Doug White, and it's episode 281 on Friday, the 17th of March, 2023. We got financial scams, Microsoft, BianLian, Leihigh Medical, CISA, Vile, and more on this episode of the Security Weekly News.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News.
How is your business staying one step ahead of cybercriminals? Secure your email applications, network, and data with Barracuda. Protect your business and go from zero to security in no time flat. Whether your team is working in one location or many, Barracuda has solutions that are easy to buy, deploy, and use. Learn how Barracuda can protect your business against ransomware, phishing, and other cyber attacks. Visit securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Barracuda, your journey secured. Lalai Padrik Sunayuv, which means something like Happy Festival of St. Patrick, you filthy animals, which involves drinking and snakes and a whole lot of street vomiting. So sounds like a good time. So pour yourself another mug of green beer and let's do the news on St. Patrick's Day. Microsoft released a script to make it even easier to patch a BitLocker security vulnerability, or maybe it wasn't very easy in the first place, but they released a script to do this in the Windows recovery environment. It's a vulnerability that allows attackers to bypass the BitLocker device encryption feature on system storage devices, and it was found last year, but a lot of people haven't patched it apparently. If you can exploit this, basically what happens, you do have to have physical access to the machine, but if you can exploit this, you're able to access encrypted data in what they called a low complexity attack. So that sounds really, really bad, actually. Microsoft said that the vulnerability cannot be exploited if the user has enabled BitLocker TPM plus PIN protection. So that, I think, was probably the most important thing there, was that maybe you should enable that, although some systems apparently don't support that. But there were two separate scripts which they released, which are different versions for Windows. So if you are going to try one of those scripts, be sure you get the right one. And it wasn't even just like Windows 10 versus Windows 11. It was more like different install versions and builds. So you have to be careful about what you do there. To do that evaluation, there are links to those scripts in the article. BianLian is a ransomware gang that has been being observed by Redacted, and BianLian they didn't put the tones on this, so I don't know if it's the right term, but it actually makes kind of sense. BianLian is a Chinese term that refers to a particular style of Chinese opera performance from SWN, and it's called face changing, which is just all these masks and makeup and all this stuff in Chinese opera. So that kind of makes sense to me that could be that's the right characters, but I don't know. So it could be something else, or maybe it's from some other language entirely. I just saw BianLian, I thought, I think that's Chinese, and I looked up what it was. But the BianLian group first appeared in public in July of 2022, and they were performing breaches of any number of high-profile companies. In January this year, Avast released a free decryptor for the BianLian ransomware that they use. And the portal, though, they use for extortion listed 118 victim organizations currently, and that was on the 13th of March when this article reviewed it, and 71% of them were U.S.-based. The point of the story, of course, is that they are apparently no longer bothering to actually encrypt anything in ransomware attacks because there's a free decryptor, although they said that decryptor only worked on certain older versions of their software. But I think because so much of this has shifted, they just steal the data and then threaten to release it to extort the organization. We had several stories about that today. I guess if there's a free decryptor and everybody's ramped up all their approaches to prevent being, encrypted and, recovery from all that, because for years now we've been saying, have good backups, have them off-site, know how to re-implement them, know how to restore, and people actually listened. And so that's sort of shut down the whole encrypted part of ransomware. So now they shift gears and they basically say, yeah, well, the fact that we can get into your networks is what's really important. So we're just going to exfiltrate everything and then threaten to release it. The article says that victims are promised that they will not leak the stolen data or disclose the breach if you pay up. And in several of these, BianLian mentioned legal, very specific legal or regulatory issues that the victim is going to have to deal with if the information was made public. And they literally listed like laws and statutes in the United States that were, they say, based on what they've stolen. Redacted went on and said that this appeared to mean that BianLian were analyzing legal risks, very targeted stuff to make better extortion arguments so that they can get you to pay up, which is kind of like sending Bunny Lebowski's toe, back to make a point. But this seems to be a growing trend with ransomware groups, according to Redacted. So it's definitely something that's out there. Speaking of which, a cancer patient has sued the healthcare provider Leihigh Valley Health Network, which I'm just going to call Leihigh because saying all that is really hard. And they were calling it LVHN, which I also find hard to say. So I'm just going to call it Leihigh. The reason for the suit? Nude medical photos and records were leaked after being stolen by a ransomware gang. So back in February, the Black Cat or ALF-V or ALF-5, I don't know how to pronounce that part, but I'll just call them Black Cat because that's the name they used before they were called ALF-V or whatever. But Black Cat broke into the Leihigh network and stole images of patients who were undergoing radiation oncology treatment and their health records. And they stole more than 75,000 of these. So the Leihigh Group is based in Pennsylvania, and they oversee 13 hospitals, 28 health centers, and many other clinics, pharmacies, rehab centers, imaging centers, and labs. So it's a very large operation. So Leihigh basically said, bite me, when they got asked to pay a ransom, and Black Cat then proceeded to start leaking patient data this month. The images that were specific sites here for the plaintiff, or the initial plaintiff, which is called Jane Doe or John Doe or whatever. The images included 2 breast cancer patients and showed them from the waist, naked from the waist up. The lawsuit states that Leihigh was negligent in their duty to safeguard patient sensitive information and seeks a class action status for everyone whose data was exposed with monetary damages to be determined. And in the United States, anyway, class action lawsuits are representative of large groups of people called a class. And so the law firm then represents they could theoretically be representing all 75,000 people, but if it's determined to be a class, I don't know how all that works in terms of that, but you've probably gotten those notifications before as well. The filing attorney said they expected the number of patients affected by this to be in the hundreds, if not thousands. So they're expecting this to be a fairly big hit if it goes through. So they have to show that negligence thing in the case, but it's a very interesting case. And as we'll see, as my commentary today, I was talking about this ICS3 report. Basically, the largest group of people being targeted by all this stuff is the healthcare business. I mean, that's really, so if you're in that industry, you are a target. CISA, which is the United States Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, also a mouthful, but it's a lot easier to say CISA, added 2 vulnerabilities impacting Plex and VMware products to their known exploited vulnerabilities catalog called the KEV. The Plex flaw is a high severity issue that's a deserialization issue, which can result in the execution of remote Python code. So like arbitrary remote Python code being executed on your server is really scary to me anyway. And if you don't recall, deserialization is the process of extracting data. So we serialize data from objects because transferring an object is not that simple. So we often put those in some format or other. Like XML used to be a format for that, and now JSON is one of the more common formats. And then that has to be then reconverted or extracted back into an object on a system. So deserialization attacks then target that process where they're extracting an object and try to embed other things in it. The security advisory for this actually came out in 2020, and said this issue allowed an attacker with access to the server administrator's Plex account to upload a malicious file via the camera upload feature and have the media server execute it. So when that got extracted on the media server, it was actually executed. Plex disclosed a breach in August of last year that they said impacted 15 million customers with usernames, emails, and password data being breached. So in a light of all this, now that the Kev at CISA is saying this is being seen in the wild now. So I know this is an old news item, but the CISA just added this to their known their Kev list, which is stuff that's actually being exploited in the wild. So if you've got administrators on Plex, you're going to need to change their passwords and implement other factors to prevent people from targeting this. Now, all that meant that this older breach suddenly became active in the wild for unpatched Plex media servers, of which there apparently are quite a few. The article then goes on to sort of say they think that the LastPass data breach last year may be related to the Plex bug, because that maybe they're trying to get these credentials, because they do have to log in as an administrator in order to execute this. But they think that the hack against LastPass came from a DevOps computer that was the source of the breach. So they think that maybe this bug was used to exploit that. It was a little, but there's a lot of details there too. A second vulnerability was added to the list as a remote code execution in Xstream, which was being used to exploit VMware products, in particular VMware Cloud Foundation and NSX Data Center for vSphere, being vulnerable to that. So if you're subject to CISA's Kev list, like a lot of government agencies are now, you are required to address these issues before April 1st. So just putting that out there. 2 men from the United States were charged for breaking into the DEA. Sagar Stephen Singh, called Weep, is a 19-year-old from Pawtucket, Rhode Island, Ocean State. And Nicholas Cerullo is a 25-year-old resident of Queens, New York. Yay, Queens, who goes by Convict or Ominous. The two are part of a group called Vile, which should tell you everything you need to know about that. And they specialize in obtaining personal information, or PII, about third-party victims, which is then used to harass, threaten, or extort the victims. So Vile has, for a while, been going out and they gather all this stuff up. And then try to get you to, they try to manipulate you with it. According to the Justice Department, Vile uses all sorts of methods to obtain the PII, including tricking customer service employees. So this is an old approach, but a good one. Fraudulent legal notices sent to social media companies to obtain registration information. So they actually fake court orders and things like that. Co-opting and corrupting corporate insiders. So, evil maid attacks. Public and private databases being scanned and scraped, U.S. government databases being accessed illicitly, and official email accounts from other countries being used to approach various and sundry people. Singh and Cerullo would post information obtained in an online forum. Once they did that, the victims are contacted and extorted into paying to have their information taken down. So they send out a notice saying, go to this site, you'll see that we have your personal information here. If you'd like us to remove it, pay us this much. But they also use the threat of exposure to extort victims into giving up access to their social media accounts. So they were targeting people that I presume had a lot of followers, and then they would basically resell access to their social media account to other third parties. The Department of Justice said that the two were also members of DocsBin, which probably you're familiar with, which is a forum focused on personal information. The charges say that Singh used stolen credentials to log into a U.S. federal government portal on the 7th of May last year. That portal, which they did not specify which one it was, had access, though, apparently to law enforcement databases, including the DEA, and this particular database tracked narcotic seizures. Don't know why they wanted access to that, but, they could probably, extort people there as well. Krebs went on to report that Cerullo is a security researcher who often has many, many vulnerability disclosures on major companies down through the years, and had another partner that was named Ryan Stevenson, who goes by the name Phobia. And Stevenson was charged in 2019 with crypto theft via SIM swapping. Krebs had also reported that Stevenson was earning bug bounties back in 2018, but was selling the vulnerabilities elsewhere before claiming the bug bounties. So basically, they're criminals, so, that's what criminals do. And and there was, the sentencing was anywhere from 5 to, I don't know how, a lot of years. So again, that probably doesn't play that well in federal prison. And if you're messing with the feds, they probably don't put you in the, like prison light sort of sentencing. I don't know. Maybe they do. This article is called 6 Things to Do on Social Media Right Now, and it is readable by most anyone. I don't mean it's readable like you can get to it. It is on the Washington Post, but it had a high readability score. And the reason I put this here is not because I know you don't know these things, but because I always like to think that maybe you're looking for articles you can pass along to your users, and by users I mean the people that work for you or the employees at your company or your family members or whatever. So their guide says, turn on two-factor. Well, I agree with this is about Facebook. Turn on two-factor, yeah. Update your email address to your current one. Yeah, I don't know about that one. I guess for average people, that would be okay. I don't like that idea. I don't like having my current. I use a Dropbox kind of email for all that sort of stuff. Update weak passwords. Well, that's a good one if you can talk them through it. And store them someplace safe. So, yeah, don't type them all into your Facebook post. I saw somebody do that once. I guess they thought they were typing somewhere else, and they actually posted all this. Yeah. It then goes on to say, know when you're being scammed. Well, that's sure easy to say, right? Boy, oh boy. But they did have some tips for that too, like trust no one. And that's a tough one. It's tough to get people to do that. Turn on login alerts. Yeah, that's a good one. And back up your Facebook data so that you have an option, because there are people that are actually exploiting people by holding their Facebook data hostage, apparently. And so I agree with that. So if you may be thinking social media is not your business, but remember, they may be using this to get to your organization. So, helping your users avoid getting scammed is helping you every single time. I would personally add to this, don't put anything on social media that you wouldn't leave laying on the table at the nursing home where your mother or your grandmother is. But that's just me. Some people obviously are much more comfortable putting up bikini shots of themselves or Speedo shots. If you want me to do Speedo shots, I will, but you'll have to go to my OnlyFans for that. I might also add, do an annual review of your content and remove things that you've learned are a problem, like PII. People put up personal photos all the time with license plate, home numbers, all kinds of stuff. And I know people can figure out where you live and so forth, but the more you give them, the easier that gets. All of it can be used to exploit you. Anyway, it's a good low-tech article that has instructions for cleaning up Facebook anyway, so it's worth a share to your user. Euler is a London-based DeFi platform, and I actually didn't know that term. I knew what it meant once I read about it, but if you don't know what the term DeFi is, it refers to decentralized finance. And for me anyway, and I know some of you love this kind of stuff, for me it's a scary place. Centralized finance, and maybe it's just because I'm old, I don't know, but centralized finance is the traditional regulated industry of banking and investment. And in most countries, at least in the West, there are rules and regs and oversight and all these kind of things. And I know we can all be critical of all that stuff all we want, but a lot of those rules, like let's bring back the Glass-Steagall Act for banks, but, to keep banks from doing bad things. But for some reason, of course, people, usually bankers, don't want that. DeFi means you can avoid all that. So DeFi basically says, hey, we're just a free-for-all Wild West kind of place, and we don't have any fees, and we don't have this, and we don't have that, and we don't have all these pesky rules and regs. So you just, you worry about it. I like the idea of it in theory, but I'm really scared of the infrastructure. I mean, BankX charges fees for me to do stuff, but at least I have some kind of faith that my money is there and it's backed up by the FDIC, and it hasn't all been invested in something ridiculous. Although since Glass-Steagall was repealed, they can invest in NTFs or whatever, or NFTs. I don't know what NTFs are. But I at least feel like with the FDIC that my $29.94 in my savings account is safe and secure. But if I take that and I convert it to Bitcoin or something, I may be avoiding some fees, but where exactly is my money? It's in a highly volatile currency, and Bitcoin is the least volatile of some of these things. Well, Euler lost $196 million to something called a flash loan, which I also did not know what it was. But I went and looked it up, and then I did know what it was. It's basically an instant loan. So if you've ever gotten a loan, you know that it takes time to get a loan processed for any, serious amount of money. Now, credit cards loan us money, and we pay that money back on a regular basis. So that's a type of instant loan. But this was something completely different. So what these guys do is they allow you to use your crypto wallet as collateral for loans that are immediate. So that means they simply say, boom, you want a loan, we take it out of your crypto, we put it right back in your crypto, you have the money for however long you want it, and then you pay it back. And that's all over and done with. Now, the common application of this is called an arbitrage transaction, and in particular, arbitrage in crypto. So they're trading across several platforms. Arbitrage, if you don't know what that is either, and I didn't know what that was, is where you find a difference in prices. So if this is buy low, sell high, but arbitrage is usually about minuscule differences in currencies, and so that disparity becomes how you make your money. So my example is you buy one Bitcoin on a site for $1, and I know Bitcoin costs more than that, but let's just keep it simple. You buy one Bitcoin on a site for $1, but on site Y, you can sell Bitcoin for $1.001, which means you make 0.001 Bitcoin per transaction. And you do that a million times, and it starts to add up. But in order to do that, you need the money to buy the Bitcoin until you sell the Bitcoin, right? So you buy it and you sell it. This all happens really, really quick, and it's almost all automated now. So if I'm buying Swiss francs and I'm trading them for British pounds and there's a slight disparity, I buy one and sell it. I don't care about the actual product. I'm just buying it and unloading it really, really quick. So you do this over and over and over again. And so this has been going on forever in foreign exchange. So the DeFi industry and flash loan operations try to automate all this so that you can do a lot of automated arbitraging really, really fast and pay all the loans back at the end. So in the above example, the one Bitcoin's bought and sold, and the loan is executed instantaneously. You make the buy, you make the sell, and the loan is repaid. And all that happens super, super fast. So the Euler attacker used flash loans to borrow from Aave and Balancer, which are two companies that make flash loans, and deposited the money at Euler. So it looks like a regular old arbitraging type transaction. But then what happened was, and they did not know how they did it, but somehow they broke the cycle and the payback part didn't happen. So they borrowed the flash loan, put it at Euler, and then extracted it. But the loan didn't get paid back. Oops. So not a lot of details on that yet, but I think I might just convert my $29.94 into shotgun shells and meth or something that I know will hold its value in the long run. So I get to do a commentary today, and it's sort of going to be a continuation of what we were just talking about, but in a way. But you're stuck with me, so we probably should have had Aaron on St. Patrick's Day and all, but whatever, and he probably could have pronounced that Gaelic greeting better than I could. Anyway, I'm going to go back to the well since we were talking about this anyway, but we're talking a little bit about ransomware and crime. So all this crime stuff was going, and I was reading this 32-page article that came out of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which is the FBI for our out-of-town friends, and their center it's called the Internet Crime Report 2022, and it's published by ICQ or IC3. I don't know how you pronounce that either. But this is a report they started doing, I think back in like 2017 maybe or something like that. And it's published officially by the Internet Crime Complaint Center, which is IC3 at the FBI. Now, there's some caveats about this type of report from me about statistics. So anytime people start tracking things, it's going to be a while before there's any kind of data that makes any sense. And trying to predict trends, especially on things that change quickly, is kind of difficult. And, cybercrime is going to be a twitchy one. I'm glad they're doing it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not criticizing the fact that they're doing it. I'm just saying we have to be very careful about drawing conclusions and inferences from this kind of data. I mean, it really wasn't that long ago officially that there was no cybercrime, right? I mean, if you go back to 2016 and ask most any company or the government about cybercrime, they would look you straight in the eye and say, we don't have a problem with that. Because their official policy was, we don't talk about it, we don't report it, we just deal with it if it happens. But I think that's changing. So evidence started emerging, along about 2016, 2017, and it was obvious people were being hit, and ransomware firms were releasing information and bragging, and that whole closed-mouth nature of cyber, the cybersecurity business and corporate IT in general, was that we don't talk about it. But they're starting to get pressure because they're seeing evidence that they're lying, and they don't want to do that either. Law enforcement and the government, they make corporate legal look like a drunken tourist babbling secrets on the streets of Mexico, because they don't say anything. So some of this, I think, is a change in ethos in various industries. And I know that when Ken Bell and I first started the cyber disruption team in Rhode Island a long time ago, none of the people that were coming to our meetings that we talked with from corporate would even consider calling the police, because they were afraid that the police were going to come in and seize all their equipment and shut their business down while they tried to investigate. And they didn't have much faith in the police at that point. I think that's changed. We've seen that change. We've seen interactions. We've seen stuff like that cyber disruption team, try to bridge some of that. We've seen the FBI trying to reach out, come to those kind of meetings, meet with their constituents, and try to convince them that bad things aren't going to happen if they report. So what may be is what they're calling increasing levels of cybercrime are maybe not actual changes in the amount of cybercrime, although I'm sure it's increasing, but rather it may simply be increased reporting of cybercrime. So you have to be a little bit careful about the interpretation of this data. And I mean, if a ransomware attack occurs in the forest, and does it still make that swishing sound? I don't know. Is it a chittering sound or a swishing sound that ransomware makes when it's running? Must be something. Actually not. But this report looks really bad up front. I mean, when they started in 2018 until the 2022 report, complaints rose from 351,937 in 2018 to 800,944,000 in 2022, which sounds pretty shocking. I mean, that's a lot. The losses associated with those claims went from $2.7 billion in 2018 to $10.3 billion in 2022, which is, again, pretty shocking. But it may be reporting bias because people didn't report losses and they didn't track losses and they didn't report cyber events. But it did represent a 128% increase in the number of complaints since 2018 and a 281% increase in the level of losses. But the statistician in me is still maintaining, I don't know if we've met all of our assumptions for statistical data here, and we only have 5 years of data to go by anyway, and there was a pandemic in the middle of that. And again, I'm not trying to discredit the report. You should read the report. It's actually useful. But it's just a matter of, let's be careful we don't get too carried away on our interpretation. Phishing went down from 2021 to 2022, which doesn't shock me because phishing was so prevalent during the pandemic and so many people were at home where they could do whatever they wanted. That is probably some pandemic effects. It could also be the billions that we've spent trying to teach people to spot phishing emails. Maybe that's starting to work. I don't know. I mean, this is a 32-page report, so it's not that bad to read or at least look through. I'm not covering the whole thing or we'd be here all afternoon. But, some of the high points of the 32-page document, in 2022, the largest losses out there were from, and I know you just said ransomware, but it wasn't. It was investment scams. Ransomware was big, but investment scams were worse. Crypto scams were growing rapidly. Now, most of these victims of the scams were in the 30 to 49 age group, so not who you thought. You thought, it's going to be a bunch of old people who got sucked into some kind of, Nigerian prince scam, but it wasn't. It was crypto scams being pushed against 30 to 49 age group people. And most of the crypto scams were in these categories like liquidity mining, which is where they get you, it's like a flash loan. They get you to attach your wallet to some app and then they drain it. So there's just straight scams in that too, right? They say, plug into this game and you're going to get all these. We did a story on that recently. You're going to get all these bonuses and things if you attach a crypto wallet and put some money in it. Social media hacks, which is fake products and get rich schemes, which have always worked. Celebrity impersonation. And they don't even have to impersonate them, right? They went out and got Larry David and Matt Damon to go on there advertising crypto. It wasn't a scam per se, but they were telling you to put, to hawk everything you owned and put into this crypto. And of course, people lost their money. But they pretend ones too. And of course, now we've got deep fakes where you end up getting a celebrity or apparently a celebrity trying to talk you into investing because it's such a good deal and they have all their money tied into it, and boom, 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 and so on. Not a lot new in the real world, but most of these types of scams have been playing on victims forever, but crypto makes it so much easier. Ransomware, of course, that's a biggie. In 2022, IC3 Center received 2,385 complaints about ransomware, with reported adjusted losses, I'm guessing that's real dollars, of more than $34.3 million. Now, and I bet this number is a kind of low based on what we all know, that people still don't report all this. They found that there were more of the attackers were using exfiltration and data release threats to try and get the victims to pay up, like we were just talking about. And apparently, some of the people did listen to us and put controls in place to try to slow this down. But based on this data, the healthcare and the public health sector had the most reports of ransomware attacks, and the defense industrial base had the least. And I would still say that the likelihood that a defense contractor is going to contact anyone and risk losing their status and reputation is pretty low. Or maybe they just do a really good job. I mean, that's possible too, right? They are protecting national security interests. Critical manufacturing and government facilities were the next two most reported sectors for ransomware. The three top ransomwares in 2022 were Hive, Aleph V, and Lockbit. Another big area was call center fraud. This is where that guy calls and says, "Hi, my name is Bob," and tells you your computer's being used to hack the FBI and they need to install something to try to stop the hacking or you're going to be banned from the internet forever, which of course gives them complete control over your system, and then they jump in and drain all your bank accounts. The reports were broken into the smaller categories of government impersonation, which is those fake IRS tax calls you're going to be starting to get right about. In fact, I think I got one during the show because I've been getting one from that same number, and I saw it pop up again. And it's one of those, you're in hock with the IRS. They're going to come arrest you. You need to call us immediately so that we can arrange for a immediate payment of this. But there were 11,554 victims reported of that, with $240 million in losses in 2022. And then there's the tech and customer support scams, which had 32,538 reports with $806 million in total losses. Victims over 60 years of age lost over $724 million in 2022, just based on what was reported. That's not going to count everybody who said, forget it. So let's summarize from that. You need a ransomware plan, and you should assume that data is going to be exfiltrated now. So if you get phished, you're going to lose data, and they're going to try to extort you with that. So you better figure out what you're going to do to stop this, or how you're going to isolate data you do not want under any circumstances to release. Because when it happens, and I hate to tell you this, when your hair is already on fire, it's too late. You may want to get out more information with your people about all these scams to your employees and your families, because it's kind of like that sex talk you had with your mom and your dad. Remember that? Or maybe both of them at once, and they sat you down and began to explain the facts of life, probably long after you'd kind of figured all that out by reading some, magazine or something. But this is your chance for revenge by setting your parents down and explaining how internet scams work to them in that uncomfortable conversation. And that way, when some AI calls in your voice and tells them that they need, they need to lock down their bank account right now. Oh, you don't know how to lock it down? Let me help you with that. I just need to install this one little app and you'll be fine. Because I work for the government. It's fine. They need to learn how to say go to hell. My mother would never say go to hell, so I told her just to use a fine old southern rusty hacksaw blade. Well, bless your heart, dear. But just keep it up to prevent this kind of thing from happening. Phishing, ransomware, and scams are modern incarnations of scams that have been around since the dawn of time. I remember standing on this pier on the Mediterranean Sea, and I was watching people trying to rip off tourists with fake silver jewelry, and I was thinking, I bet Roman or even Egyptian sailors got ripped off standing right here, more than 2,000 years ago, because, the pier was that old. And Ponzi scams, Spanish lottery swindles, and everything else has been going on since long before the dawn of any kind of modern technology. But the tech that we have now allows scammers to get right in your face and not even have to show their face to do it. A guy scammed my dad one time by repaving his driveway, which actually meant they painted it black and it all washed away the next time it rained. But, at least he had to show up. My dad filed a report on what he looked like in his truck and everything else, and they were looking for him. Now you can con the whole world without ever leaving the comfort of your overstuffed armchair in a bat cave somewhere. So I would definitely get out your updates, your warnings, and such. And you might even want to read this report. It is useful. Maybe the numbers are a bit squishy, but it's damning all the same. So check that out and maybe even pass it along. And finally, the Register has this column called On Call about tech support, and they were talking about acronyms and how this person got fired over it. I saw it happen, and I'll tell you about that one too. But on this particular one, the person had created the acronym SWN, and the creator kept telling everyone, don't worry about it. Blame it on SWN. SWN was short for stupid user. Now, I had heard that one before, actually. I've heard other shops using it. Now, this went on, and well on until a new manager was appointed for the unit, whose name was Susan. and they didn't know why there was all this stuff around the office that said, blame it on Sue, blame it on Sue. And then it was explained to them, and the person got fired. The acronyms FUBAR, SNAFU, Old Military Nuggets come to mind. They also mentioned PEBCAC, which is one that you've probably heard before, which stands for Problem Existing Between Chair and Keyboard. Charlie Foxtrot's one of my favorite one. That came from the police and the military. But anyway, the person who came up with the whole Sue thing got fired. I don't think that's very fair, but be careful when you come up with these acronyms. In the one I was doing, a forensics case was being done, and we noticed a lot of users had these tags on their database accounts that said PETA, P-I-T-A. Now, me being a huge fan of PETA, I thought this was some sort of racist thing or other related to that bread that everybody likes. But the IT guy who had done this actually said it meant pain in the ass. So considering that the owner of the company and the COO, who had now seen this data, and both asked me to find out what PETA meant, since both their accounts were flagged PETA 2, which did indeed mean squared. And they basically asked me to find out what it meant. When we did find out what it meant, it ended up getting the help desk director who had tagged all those accounts fired. So be careful what you say out there and what kind of acronyms you create. That's the news, though. We'll see you next week on the Security Weekly News.